go. Hey, you guys. Today we are going to be talking about the big topic, AI. And I would have loved to have Henry on, but his flight got canceled. He does work with computers, so he would have been able to really give us the expertise. But we got Sage on, and Sage isn't that bad, if you want to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'm the next best thing.
Yeah,
That's
next best
legit.
thing.
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely a big gap of knowledge. I mean, I don't work with computers or anything to the extent Henry does, but I know that I'm from PA and there have been a lot of data centers that have been either being built or people have been trying to build them. And I've witnessed firsthand some of the destruction they cause.
Yeah. Getting right into it, right. Well, first of all, every single good Marxist explanation start from the base. So, just getting into a political economy and things like that. Well, what automation really is it's constant capital. And so there are two types of capital. There's variable capital, which is the capital that capitalists will use to hire out human workers, right? These are the wages they pay us. And this is the kind of capital that does create value because labor creates value overwhelmingly under the capitalist system. It's one of the few commodities that can. And then the other is constant capital, and these are machines of production and also automatons. And AI represents a constant capital. And under capitalism, value produced by variable capital, which is human laborers, it's constantly transformed into dead labor, from living labor into dead labor. It's invested into constant capital, machines, automatons, things like that. And as more is invested into constant capital or variable capital, what happens is ruptures, right? Big amounts of workers being thrown off into reserve army of laborers or, unemployed people. It leads to falling rates of profit because remember, variable capital or human labor is the main source of value under capitalism. So these automatons, they can't create value. They can only impart pre-existing value that they've gotten somewhere from else within the value chain onto the commodities they produce. So it creates a falling rate of profit over time as more money is invested towards constant capital or these automatons than variable capital. But that is the general tendency of capitalism to invest more money towards constant capital than variable capital. Why does it do this? Because it can create commodities faster, which in the short term makes it more profits. And of course, capitalism is a competition. So they are always trying to compete with each other. And so AI really is sort of like the final horizon. We're very much in the baby steps of it, of this new automaton that is revolutionizing, in many ways, um, our mode of production, our mode of capitalism. However, the question really is, how much can it innovate, and how much is it just hype? I'm not really sure. Sage, do you have any words on that?
I think it can definitely innovate because I know people who have actually used it for several things. I know one person who was a teacher, and with teaching, you have to, at the lower levels, of course, schedule the day so the students all have a break, but there aren't too many on break at once. The needs are fulfilled. That's largely something that's done manually. But now that it's being done with AI, I've seen from people who have talked to me about this, they've definitely realized they've had more time to work on other aspects of the curriculum and fulfilling the needs of students. But we also definitely see that AI has, in fact, been used for many trivial things. Like, everyone's familiar with AI slop, unfortunately. And I think that's definitely what comes to mind for most people. And unfortunately, I think it's becoming a much more large part of what it should be used for, such as helping teachers with scheduling for their school and their classes.
What AI's utility really to me seems like is that it's able to process large amounts of information, right? And interpret it very easily. You can feed AI data sets and it'll spit them out for you pretty easily. And in this sense, it could, in a socialist world, be used in amazing ways to increase productivity, and by increasing productivity, get us time off of work. However, under capitalism, As Marx pointed out within Das Kapital, innovations under capitalism are used to extract more surplus value out of us because they make us more productive, and therefore we produce more commodities, and then capitalists are able to sell those commodities for cheaper. And then also, capitalists are inherently and that's called relative surplus value. It's the surplus value capitalists get from you by making you work faster and more productively. And then, of course, there's absolute surplus value, which is surplus value capitalists get out of you by making you work as long as possible. Um, and in this sense, under a socialist world, I think almost every single issue with AI goes away, right? The environmental impacts, well, then under a socialist world, it wouldn't rely on a coal guzzling energy grid. And then also there would be environmental regulations put in place, or some sort of environmental policies put in place to keep AI from polluting local areas, such as it is doing right now in Nashville, in very poor black neighborhoods. Uh, Artists' work being stolen, right? Under a socialist world, artists wouldn't have to rely on their work to survive. And in that essence, their work being used to train an AI algorithm wouldn't really matter that much because it wouldn't be their livelihood. And of course, there could be more ethical ways to train AI under a socialist world, whereas, under capitalism, these companies are only interested in, hey, making as much profits as possible. So they'll steal artists' work all the time. Um,
Yeah, I guess one thing I'd say about that is we've definitely seen with China, there's been a great effort to be environmentally conscious with the AIs they've been developing. We've seen that's actually been a priority with their latest 5-year plan. And I was just recently watching Breakthrough News where they had the China report, and there's actually a very good video they did on this, which I'm going to recommend to our listeners. It's called China's 5-year plan. Can AI be used to invest in the people? I think that definitely puts well the question of AI and its productivity in a socialist system, but also it will have many contradictions considering the fact that overall it's part of a globally capitalist economy.
Absolutely. I mean, since time immemorial, we've always been told, and this is even a phenomenon before capitalism, that, oh my God, this new innovation will make your work so much easier and you'll have less time off of work because it'll be more productive. And what happens because it isn't owned by the masses, because it isn't owned by the majority of human beings, but a very small minority of human beings, it doesn't end up happening. We just end up working more and they end up getting more profits from us. Again, that relative surplus value. Um, uh, right now, AI feels like the Wild West, right? It feels like the dot-com bubble in many ways. Whether or not it's going to crash remains to be seen. AI is still not turning a profit, which is amazing because these companies are right now investing 300 billion, $400 billion in building up this infrastructure. And they're also right now projecting that the investments will go up to 1 trillion by 2030. And so that's just insane for something that hasn't even proven itself to generate a profit yet. And in many ways, when the internet was first coming out, people were looking for all the ways to make profit off of the internet. And they were trying this way, that way, this way, that way. And they started investing in crazy ways and trying to figure out crazy ways. And the market got way ahead of the internet, in terms of its actual ability at that time, and for people to figure out at that time how to make profit. And there was just this huge crash. So there's also that question. Right now, the economy is being held up by Nvidia stock, and will this crash? That's a big
Yep.
question. And
That's
to
something I want to say. Could I say something or anything directly? You can only suggest that things go in a certain direction. And we've seen that backfire spectacularly with the tariffs from Donald Trump. I mean, he said he wanted more manufacturing in the US. He tried to suggest everyone go and he planned the tariffs in a way that would lead to that. However, he didn't actually plan the economy itself. He didn't put the resources in to rebuilding our factories and reindustrializing our country. And if we also look at examples where capitalism has had some planning and has been somewhat successful each and every time, there have been other factors too. And if we look at, I'm going to talk about the New Deal for a moment. If we look at the New Deal, some people like to say, oh, there was some planning with that. Well, within the next couple decades, it just got completely bulldozed. And even though it was working, because they gave concessions to the socialists, again, because capitalism's just made up of individual actors who each have their own interests, even if they see something incredibly efficient that is working out, which isn't usually the case. Usually they just kind of go in their own direction. When something does work out for everyone, if the lobbyists want to destroy that project, they have every ability to do so.
Likewise, right now, America's electricity grid or energy grid is heavily underprepared for AI and electric vehicles, two things that the market really seems to be driving towards. And in order to get AI and electric vehicles really off the ground to the rate that they wanted, they would have to seriously invest in the energy grid and uproot it and build a newer one, seriously upgrade the one that we currently have. And while China built their energy grid recently to be able to handle stuff like this for the future, um, America has not been able to. And so, yeah, no, in many ways, the capitalism is not able to prepare that far ahead into the future. It's very much so caught up on short-term things. And you can see this sort of in the AI bubble right now. Every single company has FOMO, fear of missing out. I mean, the fact that Facebook is buying tracks the size of Manhattan to build AI centers on in middle America is insane. Because who the fuck is going to use Facebook AI? Genuinely, it's a nonsensical product that nobody's going to use. But there's such a fear of missing out that the market is gearing towards it, and yet AI has yet to prove itself to really be profitable. The best use case of AI that we saw so far was as of the recording of this not video podcast. The best use case of AI that we saw so far was the Coke commercial, the AI Coke commercial, and yet that took about 70,000 prompts again and again and again, revision after revision after revision, just to get the commercial right because the models kept on changing and they were wonky and they didn't look right and commercial ready. And so that is more work than it actually is efficient at this current moment. And a video generation AI may get better. It may easily get better. But at the moment, it is not profitable whatsoever. And so these heavy investments do not have necessarily a guarantee that they're going to make it. And so it does seem like a lot of this is just fictitious capital and a system just setting up for another bubble market crash, and so much variable capital has been transformed into constant capital in this process that we're seeing large contractions within the economy where people are losing jobs and becoming unemployed and things like that. And that's just dangerous, right? It's very much, I don't know if it'll get to that level, but it's very much reminiscent of '08 or even the Great Depression, the roaring market eating itself up before these big crashes. And who pays the price of that? It's ordinary people. It's not billionaires. It's not millionaires. It's just workers, and even workers who had nothing to do with tech. Because once the market goes down, the whole market goes down along with it.
Yeah. And I think there's one specific group of workers who we should pay special attention to with this. I think it's people who are actors and also special effects workers. Because recently there was a McDonald's ad that was AI, and McDonald's had to pull it because what happened was someone used the same AI model of one of the so-called actors within this ad and had them eating food from McDonald's rivals and then said McDonald's gets its food from rat meat. And I think the fact that it had to come to someone using AI to challenge AI was rather disturbing. But the point they were trying to get across was AI, not only is it very unreliable for companies, it's a huge liability for them because there's really no trademark protection on it, which ironically enough, that was what the capitalists wanted, so they wouldn't have to pay the artists they stole from. We basically also see that this is going to see actual actors losing their jobs. And we've seen in professional productions, there have been allegations of AI for at Disney for some of their lower budget ideas. We've seen also from right wing content creators, the Babylon Bee, they release a video that they use AI in. And we also see, along with that, that with special effects artists, you don't need a special effects artist when you animate something. So they're already incredibly exploited. Those of them who make unions automatically are blacklisted. Those who attempt to make unions are automatically blacklisted. The fact that these people are going to be put into more and more precarious situations because they're still going to be needed. They're still going to be needed. However, they're going to be valued less because when these companies choose between either really good special effects, really crappy AI, some of the time they're going to choose really crappy AI. And I think it's a shame that these workers who have genuinely productive skills and are able to create art for our communities, I think they shouldn't be the ones who have to face these attacks on their livelihood.
Absolutely. And that is one of the great uses of automations under capitalism. It's bludgeoning against the workers. It's using it to drive down their wages, to use it as a bludgeoning stick, even if you aren't going to fully replace them, to negotiate lower wages for them. And also by, of course, making workers more productive, the value that they produce actually lowers because they spend less socially necessary labor time on each commodity. Um, and so that drives down the price of the commodity and therefore their labor also. And so, under any other economic system that was based on collectivism and humanity, right? Socialism, communism, et cetera, et cetera. This, I think AI would be a wonderful innovation. But once again, it is so dangerous the way it is affecting workers' lives, threatening entire people's livelihoods. Um, and also, I will say though, to some extent, I think the fight against AI is a lost battle. Um, in that it does have a small use case. In that it does make a lot of things easier, and you know, um, leftists when we're constantly talking against AI and things like that. To some extent, it does strike me occasionally as being around when horse carriages were and telling workers not to use cars. Yes, of course, the effects of the market are awful, but people are naturally going to go towards the thing that's more convenient. And if somebody wants to create a viral slop and they don't have the option to use a camera or use a prompt on Sora AI, they're going to go for the easier option. And likewise, people at their work who need to get their emails written, who need to get their info sorted, or even somebody who's trying to throw together an event and needs a quick graphic. As horrible as the ethics of AI are, right? Stealing from artists who need their art to survive under capitalism, threatening workers, things like that. I think to some extent, AI is such a convenience in these spheres where the fight against it almost seems like a losing battle. It really does. It really does. I think inevitably AI will get implemented into everybody's lives in a way that is more use case based. Because right now the sky's the limit. It's the Wild West. And it's a burgeoning industry, and I think it'll get integrated into more uh, nuanced ways within the future. Eventually, it will sort itself out in that regard. But the damage it will do to the working class in the meantime will be horrific. Like absolutely, as capitalism does. And of course, if a depression or something or a great recession happens because the AI bubble bursts, I think that would be also equally as horrific as depressions and these events. They shock workers. They really do. They have long lasting effects on people's entire lives. Some people die of alcoholism. Some people die because of these depressions. And then of course there's many ethical issues with AI beyond just stealing artists' work, such as like revenge porn, creating whole events of where that fabricating whole facts and events that didn't happen, using it to bully people, using it for scams. Um, where, there are no guardrails currently on AI, where it is currently safe to use. Any nefarious actor can right now use AI for whatever thing they want to. There are no regulations, and the market is purposely unregulated because several executive orders have been um, passed. And of course, we can never expect that much from a reformist critique or working within the system of capitalism, or expecting the U.S. government to ever protect us from capitalism. But still, it is ridiculous that they are basically right now allowed to do whatever they want.
Yeah, and I guess something I'll say about this being a losing battle, fighting against it, I'd say fighting against the existence of the technology itself, maybe, but we can fight against where these data centers are being placed. We can fight against the destruction that their presence is having on our communities.
We can't
And
fight against the local pollution that they're doing.
yes, I'm convinced that we definitely have in a lot of these areas, like where I'm from, Pennsylvania, we definitely have the ability to mobilize people because people recognize the harm this is doing to their communities. And I'm convinced that with enough effort, we will actually be able to get these data centers removed from these communities. And I know it's going to be a struggle. It's not going to be easy. Nothing ever is. However, we do have that ability if we are able to essentially create a mass movement and show our dissatisfaction with the current politics around this. But not only do that, but put pressure on lawmakers, they will be forced to make these concessions to us.
Mhm. And also, nobody wants their neighborhood polluted with AI gases. I mean, that's such a but the thing is, and this is I think what's dangerous is they're purposely building them in poorer, blacker, and people of color neighborhoods. And these people are generally disenfranchised and don't have that much power politically on purpose. Whether it's due to like gerrymandering or something of that sort. And so I think for some workers, like white workers or upper middle class workers, it'd be so easy to just look away um, from what's happening, or especially if it's happening in rural areas. So we should fight against the way AI is being implemented, the way the factories are being built, or the data centers. I'm sorry, they're not factories. The data centers are being built. We should fight against the environmental costs that they're doing. Though there is a little bit of nuance to that where, even Google searches use up about uh AI does use up more resources, but AI's impact on the environment has been a little bit overstated. Google searches also use up water, for example, every single Google search you use, but AI does consume more electricity and water than a Google search. And what is AI essentially but just a glorified Google search? It hasn't reached true intelligence. It is just regurgitating information and reorganizing the information that it finds. And what's really scary is not only the revenge porn and the ethics of it and the creating of fake hyper realistic photos and videos that can fool your grandma or even Gen Z people or young people. What's also really scary about AI is that it's reshaping the internet where AIs are referencing other AIs, and half the internet is just becoming AI generated. And sometimes AI feeds into itself. So you could create entire fantasies or, entire false narratives. And not only that, people are relying on AI as a definitive source. And AI is inherently biased. I mean, it's biased by whoever was coding it, and also just by the general information that is out there. especially on controversial topics. And yet, white supremacists and just general people are treating every single AI query and answer as a definitive truth. And that's
Yeah,
insane. That really
yeah,
is insane.
yeah.
Um,
Good,
AI is inherently politically biased in so many ways towards liberalism, neoliberalism, whatever have you. Go ahead.
yeah. In terms of bias too, I got a friend and her father talks to the AI, and if he doesn't get a result he likes, he just says, "Tell me the truth," and it'll give him a different result, and he'll treat that as a fact. So, it's also a way for people to confirm their own bias too. And I think one of the biggest dangers with AI is putting it on a pedestal, which I see a lot of people do because it's considered artificial intelligence. A lot of people don't understand it's just cobbling together different data that it's read, which can or cannot be incorrect. I think once people are educated on that, hopefully there'll also be more skepticism towards the results from these machines.
There's also just the fact that nobody can trust anything they see online anymore. And there's also a lot of people that are going into psychosis with AI. And these people, they are already like people who go into psychosis with AI. They're already um, not doing mentally well. And I'm sure in any world without AI, they would have gone into psychosis with some other tool. However, the problem with AI is it's so dangerous because it confirms every single bias that you have. And we've also seen, in addition to that, just explosions of people going towards AI for therapy. And that's not necessarily a result of the AI itself, but it's emblematic of a system, capitalism, that is getting more and more isolated, more and more predatory, and more and more just rotting in so many ways to the point where workers are so isolated from their fellow man, so alienated from their work and their own products that they create, the own commodities that they create, and their own life purpose. So alienated and lost that they're turning towards AI for mental health issues. That's insane. Um, and what's really dangerous is that finally, of course, AI is being used to track us, right? Palantir, all these data centers and infrastructure that's being built is also being used by the US military. It's being implemented into the Pentagon. And a big surveillance state is being built up that ICE is using to spy on us, that the federal government is using to spy on us. And these AIs were implemented in Israel first. The "Don't call daddy" or "Daddy's not home" AI was used to target civilians within Gaza, specifically by Israel. Israel used Microsoft AIs to scrub Palestinians' phones and to justify strikes. So they would strike an area full of civilians. They would go through those dead civilians' phones, and if they found one bad thing that the civilian said about Israel, they would say, "Oh well, that's enough proof that there was a terrorist within these civilian bodies." But really, what has happened in so many ways is that Gaza was a testing ground for all these weapons, all these AIs, and now, in addition to these AIs being used to get more relative surplus value out of us, right, to make us more productive at work, replace a few jobs, and make us more productive so that they can get more surplus value out of us, capitalists, so we can make the shareholders more profits, basically. Not only that, but America has turned into the West Bank, or America has turned into Gaza, where ICE has been given just sweeping powers of surveillance and also the infrastructure to do it. And so we really are, in many ways, this is the worst case scenario in both ways, right? And we live in what is so quickly becoming a techno dystopia. ICE can track you at any place that you are. Palantir can sweep the internet for your information. Then they turn you over to a for-profit prison, right? A lot of these prisons with ICE are for-profit, and so they have an incentive to keep as many bodies in there as possible so that the taxpayers can pay them. This is essentially, we're entering a very dangerous phase. But
And
could
I
ICE?
This too. Yeah. So there might be some people who are like, well, I'm from a very affluent area. And they might be like, no ICE agents are going to go here. We're all white people. They might be saying something like that. Let's say a military drone goes loose. If it considers a child to be a target, it can consider your family to be a target too. There's no guarantee. And to the COINTELPRO people who are listening to this, what I want to say is what happens if one gets turned on in one of your facilities? I'm sorry, but it's not going to care what badge you wear. These things are just getting programmed to kill anyone indiscriminately. It's a threat to every single person on Earth in its radius.
You know, yeah, and most people are being held in. I searched it up while you were talking. Core Civic and GO Group are the two big companies that are holding most people in detention centers, ICE detention centers. So I don't know. It's just a dangerous world that's being set up that would have made it's to some extent, it's almost like 1984. You know, as much
Yeah,
as us communists hate George Orwell, the surveillance state that he predicted is coming, and it's not communist after all, is it? It's actually capitalist. It's
and
neoliberal.
yeah, and with also the ICE facilities, we know for a fact they're doing unpaid labor. We're seeing people like to call it techno feudalism, what we're seeing. I want to call it what Rosa Luxemburg called it barbarism. Barbarism is the final stage of capitalism before common ruin. And also, I'd say during common ruin. And essentially, when you have that, eventually, if it goes too far, you're not going to have any humanity left, which is why there is an imperative to organize against this.
Yeah, yeah. And in so many ways, this barbarism is manifesting the absolute worst in humanity, right? We are seeing racism, hate attacks, just racist rhetoric towards Somalis, immigrants, Hispanics, and white supremacy rearing its ugly head in a way that it's sort of always been there, but becoming more prevalent.
What we
Uh,
see with Grok, it constantly gets reprogrammed to reinforce bigoted ideas. And every so often, it realizes these ideas are nonsense and it has to get reprogrammed again. And even if it just continued to be like on the right track, which it occasionally is, in South Memphis, Tennessee, it's currently destroying that community, which shows even if it said nice things, it would still be a threat.
yeah, you know what's so funny too? Like all the Nazis on Twitter. Every time every time Grok is, um, reprogrammed, they're like, "Oh my god, they got rid of Grok's, Jewish influence," or something like that. Now Grok's based again, or something like that, and then Grok will go right back to, like, spitting, like, fire against, like, Nazis and stuff like that, and they'll be like, "No, the Jews got Grok." It's just like, "No, no, you idiot."
Yeah,
I
I
don't know,
love how
you
I
know
love I saw this meme about Nazis, and it's like Nazis explaining how Jews are inferior to them, yet they're constantly getting outsmarted by them at the same time.
I know. I know, it's insane. Their whole worldview is insane. And it's not even based on like economics or anything. It's just like, well, if white Christian men were in charge, they would help out other white Christian men. And no, like white Christian men have fucked over white Christian men since the beginning of time. You know, even their so-called like golden ages that these guys look up towards. You know, the people were getting ordinary Christian men were getting fucked too during this time. I don't know. Their entire
Talk
worldview.
about the 1950s and the 1960s, and it's like, you know how many people had to die for those conditions to be possible for just a small section of the population? Your ancestors weren't given this because there was some Christian dude who felt nice. They got this because they've died. They died so you could have the ability to afford a house. They died so you could have GI programs after leaving the military. They died so you could have Social Security. These
Yeah.
were forged by struggle, these programs, not by generosity.
And it wasn't struggle against other people of color or, Jews. It was a struggle against the capitalists. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's such a stupid conspiracy. It's a kindergartner's worldview.
That
It really
yeah.
is. It's a kindergartner's worldview. But anyways, um, moving on from that side tangent. But what we've also seen is that alt right culture and right wing culture, a- and for whatever reason, right wing culture, and this is my personal theory, it's that right wing culture is so out of touch with reality itself. They have to invent a reality, right? And so they am really taken to AI, right? They'll constantly use AI to support their racist worldviews. Black people acting like this, they'll type in prompts like that and use it. I'm the Chad white guy. So much of online right wing culture really is just them playing with dolls, right? Like Wojak dolls, where they're always the Chad and their enemy is like this chinless guy. But in reality, I mean, these guys don't look like the Chad. They look like the chinless guy. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with them.
Yeah,
Fundamentally,
and I mean, we've seen also that this idea of having to invent a reality for propaganda is nothing new. I mean, we can go through examples from every socialist state. I'm currently reading Terrorism and Communism by Leon Trotsky. This was, it of course has its backwards views on the militarization of trade unions, which of course is an incorrect idea. But we see this was during the time when all the other people in the Comintern were like, "Okay, this is a good piece." So even, Lenin, um, even the American communists were in favor of this work, like, William Z. Foster. He said this was a good work. Essentially, Trotsky in one section talks about how there was all these fake telegrams people would make that supposedly came from Soviet Russia. Some of them came from villages that didn't even exist. And they would say stuff like, oh, there were women who were being enslaved by like the higher ups in these villages. And it was always just a whole bunch of nonsense. But
right?
even during the early days of socialism, there has always been this propaganda of creating a false reality. And of course, we see this with the DPRK. Like, honestly, it's scary how effective it is. You'll talk to a perfectly rational person, and then they'll be like, Kim Jong un said he invented the hamburger. You'll be like, can you show me the source for that? And they'll get angry, they'll get defensive. I mean, it's just very scary how much that propaganda can easily seep into a society.
And for many people right now, the internet is their main source of truth, their main source of looking at the world. And if now we have generative AI and AI videos, now they don't know what to believe. I mean, the internet for so many people is how they interact with the globe, the news, the world outside of their immediate surroundings. And so for many people, the internet is essentially the world, right? Outside of your small little town or city or wherever you live. And if now we can't trust what's on the internet, a good portion of your worldview and your world may be manufactured, may be fake. And even if governments aren't purposely creating AI videos, hyper realistic AI videos to trick us into consent, who's to say that people won't believe that people will no longer believe anything that anybody has to say, including governments? This just makes conspiracy theories so much easier to do. And you might be sitting at home like, well, you should never trust the government. Obviously, it's a big bourgeois capitalist thing. And I'm 100% with you to a point, right? When people stop trusting, for example, the FDA or, health departments, things like that. Uh,
Yeah, generally independent organizations.
Generally independent organizations on vaccines, on what's safe to eat, what's not safe to eat, and they start going towards raw milk and unvaccinating their kids. AI is going to exacerbate distrust in science, common sense science, and people. The big reason people go towards conspiracy theories, in my opinion, is because they have the pattern recognition of class consciousness, but they don't have the language or the final solution yet, which is, it's capitalism. And so when people are feeling shitty within their lives, they'll turn towards all kinds of things, right? Alienation is a hell of a drug. Because capitalism is incentivized to make you work as long as possible, pay you as little as possible, and pay you only as much as is needed for you to reproduce itself. That's called the subsistence wage. How much would it take for this guy to go home, replenish himself to be able to work the next day? The bare minimum for that, right? Roof over the head, food on the table. Um, Maybe like a cigarette or something, like enough wages for that, and enough wages even to have a kid. But capitalism can also get itself into a mode where it gives you less than subsistence wages in many cases, as we're seeing all across America, right? Like nobody's able to afford an apartment anymore with minimum wage. And as people feel shitty about their lives in this essence, as they feel shitty about their lives about alienation, right? Being separated from the very products that they create, having, working 8 hours a day to make another man rich and not their own lives, working for somebody else essentially, not themselves or their coworkers, they turn towards health weird places, right? Oh, the reason I'm feeling shitty is because I'm eating the wrong kinds of food, right? This food has been processed. So let me go towards raw milk, which has tuberculosis in it. Like, matter of fact, it has tuberculosis in it. Let me do pseudoscience like seed oils are bad for you. Seed oils, they lower inflammation and heart disease risks. The problem with seed oils is they are in highly processed foods, but you shouldn't be eating highly processed foods very often, right? But other than that, seed oils are fine to consume. The issue is vaccines, and so they unvaccinate their kids, and then also, of course, the other conspiracy theories, right? Like September 11th, what have you, like the hundreds of other conspiracy theories, and so conspiracy theory brain people right now, AI is just going to make that so much worse. Like trusting scientists, trusting health recommendations that are well studied, and have gone through a rigorous scientific process, and that is just going to make people's lives a lot worse. And while you may think that people distrusting like everything that they hear from the government, that might create class consciousness. And yeah, I mean, if we're talking about like Washington D.C., that might, it might also as much, if they're distrusting like the FDA or the CDC or things like that, it might also as much just create whack jobs, right wing whack jobs that are more or less, you know, like who's the guy who got Charlie Kirk? It was Tyler Robinson, right? That was his name.
I don't know. I think you're right.
Yeah, it's just gonna create Tyler Robinson types. These just very reactionary right wingers that just go out and don't, in these adventurous acts, and so I don't know. In many ways, there's just no guardrails with AI. In a socialist country, imagine AI being used to plan out the economy, right? Like feeding massive amounts of information for it to plan the economy, or even there's been a couple studies done, a couple of researchers who needed to figure out the right kind of chemical combinations to create new medicines. And they fed the data to AI, and AI spit out all these kinds of chemical compositions that the researchers missed. These are the best use cases of AI, but that's not what it's being used for. It's being used to replace workers. It's being used to replace artists. It's being used to replace people's livelihoods. It's being used to cushion us, bash us with a stick, drive down our wages, and threaten to fire us if we speak up to the boss or unionize. It's being used to spy on us, and build up this infrastructure of spying. And it's being built in poor black neighborhoods, polluting the air. And also, it's being used for right wing, reactionary, conspiracy theory, racist dogmas and worldviews, right? Where these right wing guys who look like the fucking incel, right? In their memes, where they're the Chad and the black Somalian, Indian, trans, whatever is the chinless one. These chinless guys, they create this whole fictional world where they're the guy with the big ass jaw, and everybody else is chinless, right? It's being used in the worst case scenario. It's the worst case scenario in every single way. It's just there's no good, nothing good coming out of it right now. That's all I can really say.
Yeah. And I guess something else we got to talk about with the idea of paranoia coming from AI. Imagine what's going to happen if there's a second pandemic, or if when the next pandemic hits, hopefully by then we'll have socialism on a larger scale in more countries. But if things keep going the way they're currently going, imagine how awful the next pandemic's going to be. Imagine how much misinformation there's going to be. Like, I was watching the second Borat film, and Sacha Baron Cohen, he's a complete piece of shit as a person,
Mm.
but that film was the second Borat film was fairly funny. And I was watching it with my friend, and as we're watching it, while they're talking, Borat is with these people who are kind of conspiracy theorists. They're very much into QAnon. Eventually, they decide they're going to go as part of the plot of the movie. They go to this concert. It's an actual concert, like a live concert with like actual people who were there, not as actors, but as participants. And he goes to this right wing audience and he starts singing about gassing scientists like the Germans did. And I think if he was able to do that and get applause, imagine how bad it's gonna be if AI is able to create a narrative reinforcing those misheld beliefs.
Yeah, it just makes conspiracy theory minded people 100 times crazier, and also it makes the falling rate of profits so much worse. Right there, America is going through a profitability crisis in that eh, right now, right? For example, this is my favorite thing to point out, and this is what proves Marx's labor value theory so right in so many ways, that human labor power is the main source of value under capitalism, right? You actually need human laborers. They're the main source of value. American manufacturing right now manufactures more than it ever did during the golden period of manufacturing, right? In the 50s, 60s, 70s, before globalization. But it doesn't produce that much value because the majority of it is automatized, right? There's so few humans actually working within manufacturing that the majority of it is robots, automatons, constant capital, right? So American manufacturing has entirely been turned into constant capital from variable capital. AI exacerbates this so much where in the short term, sure, these companies are chasing their profits and it will make them enormous profits. But over time, as more is invested from that variable capital into that constant capital, from human labor power into this automaton, it creates, once again, a huge profitability crisis. And how are they going to solve this? Through imperialism, through Nazism, through fascism. Every time these empires have overwhelmingly solved profitability crises like Germany, right? Like Italy, right? They saw huge profitability crises before World War II. What happened? World War II, right? What that allowed them to do was destroy factories, destroy constant capital, rebuild it up, right? It was amazing. It was amazing saving grace for capital. It also killed a lot of unemployed people, reserve army of labor. These were all products of increasingly investing in constant capital or variable capital. And so what's going to happen next? I think right now we're seeing in so many ways. Why is Trump threatening to invade fucking Venezuela? There is a falling rate of profit and it is getting worse and worse. Why is the American empire acting so erratic and threatening to invade Nigeria? Why is it constantly
Yeah.
renegotiating its trade deals and putting up sanctions and things like that? The goal is just to squeeze as much value as it can out of the working class of the world. And also, why is it cracking down on migrants? It's to get rid of the reserve army of labor, these extra workers that capitalism no longer needs. And so, and of course, capitalism loves undocumented migrants. It always has. Donald Trump himself, his companies employ undocumented migrants. Donald Trump made his fortune off of illegal Hispanic workers. And of course, nobody's illegal on stolen land. So that just slipped out. My bad. I'll correct myself on that. Um, Undocumented workers. And so the goal really right now isn't to get rid of illegal migration because eventually these companies will want them back because the wages that they have to pay undocumented migrants is so much less than a citizen. And that's the profitability is just insane. Like they're not going to give that up. You get way more profits the less you pay people, of course. I mean, that's just simple logic. And undocumented migrants, because of cultural, racist, etc., things, are able to be paid a lot less than in the market. So what this is just cracking down temporarily on the reserve army of labor and putting it in its place, telling it not to stand up, so it can squeeze as much value out of it as it can and get rid of the ones that capitalism at this current cycle doesn't need. But eventually it will need them again. And so it's just, the falling rate of profit is just leading to so many erratic behaviors from this system. And it almost seems as though we're culminating to some sort of rupture. And what that rupture will be, I'm not sure. Maybe the rupture will never happen, right? For this cycle, this specific cycle. But it does seem like so many ways we are building up towards barbarism or socialism. And increasingly, I find socialism the more rational answer, and yet barbarism, the path that most of the world is taking because we're on a roller coaster right now.
Yeah, but I'd say nonetheless, we have the ability to mobilize, and Trump wouldn't be doing such erratic and irrational if his empire had strength right now. I mean, in the past, they would kind of just like hide whatever crimes they were committing. Like, there are a lot of people who don't even know Obama was targeting schools for children with Down syndrome in Libya. A lot of people don't know that. However, now in this new age of not only social media, but also an empire that is losing its grip on an increasingly multipolar world, we're seeing more rash behavior, but also more courage from the peoples of all these different nations to condemn it. Like recently, we saw the government they literally stole a shipment of oil going from Venezuela to Cuba. They didn't have any pretext. It was outright theft, outright piracy. The fact that our government is resulting to outright piracy, which they did against the DPRK before, by the way. They've stolen cargo ships from them. But the fact that they're not only doing it, but it's actually receiving outrage, I think shows that there's hope for mobilization and organization against this, which is also what we saw recently with the anti-war rallies across the United States when it came to Venezuela.
Also, the thing is, capitalism's saving grace was the reserve army of labor, right? Capitalism was able to take value produced by workers in the global south, crystallize it into the economies of the global north, and give workers within the global north disparately higher purchasing parities in terms of the labor hours they spent to get their wages and to buy commodities than workers in the global south, right? And you can see that on a surface level without needing a Marxist analysis, right? Sweatshop labor in the global south, people being paid a lot less, even though, these factories and workers are just as productive in the global south than in the global north. And, capitalism has explained it away through like bullshit explanations, right? Oh, these economies are just not as productive as us. They're slowly getting there. You just need more time and eventually they'll be at the same pay rates as us. Of course, it's been decades upon decades upon decades, and we've been waiting for workers within India and Morocco and South Africa to get towards American levels of pay, and yet they haven't, right? Even Mexican workers haven't gone into it, and so clearly,
Single time a country makes that progress, the same people go and they're like, "Oh no, look how horrible that is." Like, you see anytime Burkina Faso makes any advances these days, everyone's like, initially everyone was like, "Look how backwards they are." And then when they start developing their own electric cars, suddenly you have all this fear from the same sectors that were chastising them for not being developed.
yeah, and of course, America will demonize and overthrow the governments that do stop this transference of value from the global south to the global north. The episode before this, we had on Torko Lausen, and his new book really explored how value is taken from the global south to the global north, in terms of paying these workers a lot less, keep transferring that value through the commodity to the global north, and having these commodities cheaper and being crystallized in global northern economies. So I won't go too deep into that. Turko Lausen in the last episode before this really goes deeply into how that works exactly. But anyways, this has created always like a labor aristocracy. And that labor aristocracy was incentivized to protect capitalism, right? Keep capitalism around, because it benefited it, right? I mean, if I'm an American worker and, right, I get to buy cheap commodities, I get a pretty good wage. Other people work multiple hours, and that value that they produce gets transferred into my paycheck and my livelihood. Why wouldn't I want imperialism, right? And it's not an issue of moral um deficiency. It's just the natural product of a system that incentivizes it. And most people don't even realize how the system works, right? But it is just a natural result of a system that incentivizes it. We shouldn't look at this from a moralistic, the labor aristocracy, from a moralistic point of view. It's just a natural product of a system. Um, right, because like a lot of the times I think communists want to like shame labor aristocrats, and it's like it's not going to work, right? They're just logically working as the system intends, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
well, we also gotta see this too. The labor aristocracy, not only is it getting diminished, but what remains of it, that power that it has is increasingly getting diminished. And even if that wasn't the case, members of the labor aristocracy are still selling their labor for wages. They are part of the proletariat, even if they are different strata of it. And while, yes, that might create contradictions, ultimately, those contradictions between them and the workers from the global south, especially in this new age of increased communication, can be solved through dialogue and solidarity rather than shaming.
Yeah, that was gonna be exactly my point. It's that the labor aristocracy is disappearing, right? It is being restructured because the falling rate of profit is getting worse and worse and worse year after year. AI is the newest addition to that. Will it be the end of capitalism? I don't know. Most likely not. But a man can dream. Right. The newest crisis. The constant capital versus variable capital or automation crisis really began with the spinning jenny, right? Or the where spinners would used to spin threads to make textiles, like clothes, and then this machine came along that could do it way faster. That was the original struggle. Now it's evolved all the way to
We also
AI.
see with the spinning jenny, I mean, we see similarly with like another invention was the cotton gin. With that, it was always, oh, it was intended to end slavery, but rather it perpetuated the system. And I think we need to understand that these technologies always have a role to play. And we can see that depending on who is in control of them, they serve different class interests.
Absolutely, and that was Marx's point, right? That the Luddites made a mistake by attacking the machines and not doing a class war. Though, actually, I think Marx was wrong about the Luddites. Fundamentally, the Luddites were class conscious, and really, the reasons that they attacked the machines was more of sending a message than actually attacking the machines. It was more so they were attacking the bosses. So I think Marx's characterizations of
Still misguided, definitely.
yeah, yeah, it wasn't still misguided, yeah. But I do think Marx fundamentally mispainted the Luddites. They were a little bit more base than they have been traditionally portrayed. Um, but yeah, no, the labor aristocracy is slowly but surely disappearing. The value is now being drained out of the labor aristocracy because of the crises of capitalism and the falling rate of profit. And we're seeing that through getting rid of the welfare state, right? Capitalism can no longer uphold the welfare state. The ACA credits are gone now, right? The Affordable Care Act credits are gone. So people are going to be thrown off of healthcare. State funded hospitals are gone. Um, so much welfare is gutted under the big beautiful bill from everywhere. We also saw Doge cutting tons of welfare and welfare jobs that basically upheld the economy and saved capitalism, right? They were there for the benefit of capitalism, not against it. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing the disappearance of the labor aristocracy so that they can demand lower wages, and capitalists can make more profits, more surplus value, slowly but surely. And so we are seeing the beginnings of the end of the labor aristocracy, or at least the privileges that it has enjoyed, right? It
Yeah.
may exist much longer, right? Who knows where capitalism may go? And if Trump's colonial wars of conquest are successful, where right now America is pivoting out of Asia, away from China, though, there's always the chance it becomes a hot war with Taiwan. But for now, overwhelmingly, America is repositioning itself towards Latin America. If Trump is able to open up the markets in Cuba, if it's able to open up the markets in Venezuela, the markets are already being opened up in Bolivia. If it's able to open up the markets in Africa through constant conquest, um, it may be able to save the labor aristocracy. However, overwhelmingly, it seems like America's setting itself up for defeat, because Venezuela is very much quickly going to become another Vietnam. In fact, Maduro is
Yes, that's
studying,
what Maduro. Yeah, that's what he said.
yeah, yeah, Maduro's studying Vietnam war tactics. He's funding peasant guerrillas, and he is
Talking
a
about people's war.
yeah, he's calling for people's war. So it seems like America's ultimately going to get drawn into a war that's going to lose. And it almost seems like, and this isn't maybe the best comparison because there are nuances to it, right? But it almost seems like the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, where it was this sort of waning experiment, and it went into Afghanistan, and it exhausted what was already on a decline, like so much of a decline. And it was sort of its final last umph. And Venezuela, so much in many ways, seems like that, to an extent. And whether or not it will be the final umph, it will be the beginning of the final umph in many ways. Um, and so the labor aristocracy is slowly dying. However, we do have to preface that by saying also, even if economically people are thrown out of the labor aristocracy ideology may still remain, right? That may take a little bit of a while for it to leave people's minds, to leave people's
Yeah,
ideologies.
Streitbach said that the American proletariat views itself as temporarily embarrassed millionaires instead of laborers. And I think that's definitely a hindrance to organizing.
Of course, because the American ruling classes have such amazing sources of ideological control. Not only do they control the algorithms and social medias and what's pushed to people, so they can push all the racist, chauvinist, pro-American stuff that they want. Uh, the idea that there's some sort of free speech where people are able to debate in this open marketplace of ideas and not a very carefully controlled debate platform by large corporations through media, which is also increasingly coming under the control of Oracle, which is an Israeli pro-Israeli company founded by the Ellison family, which now controls CNN and CBC. And
And they're trying everything.
yeah,
I mean, look in with Warner Bros.
they're trying to get Warner Bros. To push pro-Israeli conservative ideas, and they've also purged CBC and put in Barry Weiss as the head of it, who's an open Zionist. Um, they there are just so many pathways in which they can dissuade the American proletariat from realizing its new position as no longer the labor aristocracy and keep it within sort of a racist, chauvinist sphere. However, how long can that ultimately work? How long can that ultimately work before class consciousness takes over is the question. And
Very long.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. How long can you tell somebody that I don't know, like minorities are the issue when you're starving? Maybe it may work for a little bit, but as the government that's telling you that minorities are the issue continues starving you, it starts to fall flat and people
We're
start to
we're
realize it.
becoming we're becoming more diverse as a society, so it's more difficult to say the minorities are against you when they're your neighbor bringing lunch over.
Of course. And there's also this fact. Not only is America more diverse than ever, and whites are going to become a minority by 2050 with Hispanics taking over. Um, not only is all of that happening, but also 2 million people have been deported, either self-deporting themselves from America or deported by ICE. About 500,000 have been deported by ICE. And these are official government numbers, so I don't know how accurate they are. They may be more, they may be less. You never know with the Trump administration. But if 2 million people have been deported already, we should have already seen all of the promises that they made come true, right? Rent should have gotten cheaper. Food should have gotten cheaper. Affordability crises should have gone away. And yet, minorities are gone. Hispanics are gone. 2 million Hispanic people are gone. And yet, rent is still high. Food is still high. Life is still unaffordable. I mean, how longer, much longer can you keep on blaming minorities when inflation keeps on eating away at Americans' budgets? Um, I don't think that long, honestly. I don't think that much longer. People come to their senses eventually that it's not the fault of migrants that they're poor, that they're unable to afford things. It'll eventually come to realization that it is billionaires. It is a capitalist class. And sure, I mean, most people don't have the language of socialism, but they fundamentally do understand surplus value, right? Everybody understands that your boss that hires you, you create the value, he takes that value from you on some level. And people, as the crises of capitalism get worse, as it becomes more barbarous, and as the promises that they make don't come through, people will start to realize that. I'm 100% sure.
And
Um,
I mean, Kwame Ture said that if you're doing any sort of experiment anywhere in the world, if you're observing it, you'll come to the Arksted. And recently, I was not sure if you know those clip Instagram of the Hood Research Department.
no.
They're They're basically, comedians, essentially, and what they do is they kind of without any real education on a subject, just through dialogue, they try to, figure something out about it. Like, they wanted to see if the sound of silence was faster than if, the speed of silence was faster than the speed of sound by seeing how quickly they could be quiet. A lot of it's just nonsense. However, occasionally, they do figure something out, like they were talking about labor and they were like, wait a second, all the money we're given, we then just give back with bills to these companies. And if even that bit of class consciousness can emerge in people who had no prior education on the subject just through discussion, imagine what can happen with organized education.
Mhm. And also, in many ways, communism and socialism is the negation of capitalism, right? Capitalism's contradictions themselves lead to communism and socialism being birthed out of it. The communist mode of production is constantly being birthed in the capitalist mode of production without it realizing it. So, right? It constantly creates workers. It constantly creates infrastructure and means of production and centralization that lends itself towards socialism. And of course, the biggest issue always remains the relations of production, who owns them and what they use it for, and how it's distributed. But in many ways, right, as scary as things like AI are, as scary as things like, these surveillance states are, as scary as, these monopolies are and these billionaires are, they have essentially built up the socialist world, right? All that needs to be done is the negation, that big negation, the revolution in which workers take it over. They end the commodity form, they end the nation state, they end class society itself, um, and they end this mode of production itself. But all of the infrastructure is there. And so, as much as there is fear in AI, there's also hope in AI. Like, imagine AI being used to give you a 4-hour workday. Imagine AI being used to plan out the economy and make sure the most efficient usage of resources is given. Um, it, as much as it destroys us around itself, it also creates something new. And so there's always hope within my heart for that future
Yeah.
for that.
And I mean, even in 1888, with Looking Backward, which is one of my favorite books, I'd have to say, Edward Bellamy says that the rapid industrialization and monopoly politics of capitalism will create a basis for socialism. He thought that, of course, eventually the big business owners would come to their senses and realize how horrible this system was and be persuaded to create socialism. Obviously, we know by and large that's not going to be the case, but his belief that, yes, this is creating the basis for socialism, and we should be cautiously welcoming many of these developments. I think with that, that definitely shows where his strength was. And I think that definitely shows also that there is a basis for this thought. And no matter what developments capitalism creates, 9 times out of 10, we can turn those to the people's needs with the right system.
Yeah, except weapons. I think weapons are useless.
Yeah, weapons, I think initially they'll be used to protect the dictatorship of the proletariat, but eventually in the higher stages of socialism, they're going to go away and we're not going to have any.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But also weapons, I mean, they arm the working class for its capitalism's own overthrow. Again, so many of the ways it's a negation of its own mode of production. And if and when that happens, well, it's not an if, it's a when. When that happens, it will be glorious. Anyways, rounding this off, Sage, you got any final thoughts and where can people find you?
I don't have any final thoughts on this. I think we discussed it pretty thoroughly. If I have more to say, I'll definitely make a post on it and the place people can find me, which is my TikTok, which is Sage7646. Some of you might also occasionally find me on Instagram. It's kind of, I have a hybrid setup there where it's just, I post stuff from my life, but I also post my content. I'm not going to give that out right now. If you stumble upon it, feel free to subscribe to it or follow me on it. And I always welcome everyone, but again, I kind of want to keep that a bit smaller.
ChatGPT is communism based? That is a great question. Thank you for listening to the Pokepreet Podcast. If you want to support our podcast, you can always head down to our Patreon where you can get episodes up to a month early. Workers of the world unite, long live the immortal science of Marxist-Leninism. Thank you.